Discover how one amazing act of kindness transformed a dangerous mafia boss's life forever. Tony, the bull, Marino stood at the crux of shattered dreams and blood-stained ambition, the chilled wind slicing through the dark streets of Chicago. 50 years old, hardened by violence and loyalty carved in the flesh of fear, he was as notorious for his iron fist as he was for his icy heart. The streets he had carved his legacy into felt suffocating, like a noose tightening around his throat. Just days before his daughter's wedding, an impending storm of rival threats loomed, casting doubts on the empire he had dedicated his life to build. Beneath the surface of his cool exterior, anxiety gnawed at him. Could he hold the walls of his empire together when they seemed to sway precariously, ready to collapse? As he walked past the familiar alleyways, the very paths where his rise had begun, memories assaulted him. He remembered the faces of men he had betrayed, their distrust echoing in his mind. Was he destined to be a tyrant forever? The chatter of his men about betrayals and losses began to seep in like poison. Each rival gang hungered for a slice of his territory, each whisper tucked at the back of his mind like a dagger. What if I am losing control? At that moment, the weight of his choices pressed in, suffocating him with their ferocity. He had no time for vulnerability, yet his daughter's wedding should have ignited joy, and instead it magnified his fears of legacy, loyalty, and love. A dangerous trifecta. Rita, a single mother and community nurse, bustled through her small neighborhood, delivering a homemade meal to Mr. Thompson, an elderly neighbor recovering from a brutal attack. She didn't see the thorns entwined with her kindness. As she entered, she collided with an unexpected presence. Tony. Time froze. The man who sowed terror into the pages of the city now stood before her, an executioner masked as a man. Tension was palpable, but Rita's instinct to ease others surged forth. You must be Mr. Marino, she said, a gentle defiance shimmering in her tired eyes. The words hung in the air like a dare. Tony felt something shift, like Ray's warming cold skin. She resembled the warmth he had abandoned, honesty and kindness radiating from her, contrasting sharply with the shadows festering inside him. He remembered what it was like to care, aching differently now in the face of her humanity. But how could a man forged in brutality connect with love? Could he let her genuine heart seep through the armor of indifference he wore like a second skin? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue, but as the days slipped away, a betrayal slowly brewed in the underbelly of the city. A sudden ripple in the Mafia undercurrent drew his focus. It shook him as the reality settled. Could everything he had driven himself for only erupt in smoke? Tension rose like a fever, and the thought consumed him he had sacrificed empathy for power. Here was Rita's uncomplicated world of love, light, and laughter, her stories lifting the weight of the darkness he had created. But would it only make the coming storm more destructive? The impending betrayal now hung like an axe above them both, threatening to sever anything genuine he had begun to feel. In that moment, standing at the precipice between vengeance and a yearning for peace, Tony was filled with anguish. Would he embrace the cruelty that had defined his existence, or would this single spark of kindness from Rita compel him to fight against the darkness he had wrapped himself in for so long? The answer danced like flames in the backdrop, while shadows edged closer. Would he find redemption or lose everything in the fire? The night's chaos loomed around him, and Tony could feel the world tightening its grip. The chilling embrace of the night air did nothing to alleviate the turmoil within Tony. Instead, it amplified the tension, wrapping around him like a suffocating cloak. As he turned away from Rita, her gentle defiance lingering in his mind, he found himself grappling with a new thought. In his life of violence, he had never felt gripped by the threat of vulnerability. Yet here he was, facing a woman whose kindness threatened to dismantle the very foundation of his identity. Back in his dimly lit office, the walls lined with the trophies of his sinister conquests seemed to close in. The silence echoed his internal conflict. He could almost hear the taunts of his past, the voices of the men he had wronged whispering betrayals and failures. For the first time, he questioned the choices that had brought him here. A crew meeting loomed over his agenda, yet thoughts of Rita's steadfast spirit consumed him. It was absurd. How could an unassuming nurse provoke such a profound introspection? He picked up his phone, the device almost feeling foreign in his palm. What was he to do? Empower and instill fear or seek redemption? The juxtaposition of thoughts left him feeling dizzy. Why did her kindness resonate so deeply? Was he simply seeking solace in a world he had long abandoned? The questions clawed at him, the answers elusive, shrouded in shadows. The next evening, he gathered with his men, the atmosphere charged with a palpable tension. They had learned of potential insurrection, whispers of rebellion swelling in the air as his rivals circled like vultures over a carcass. Tony's voice cut through the intensity, his command demanding their attention. "We tighten our grip, harder than ever," he declared, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. Yet, beneath the bravado, he felt a seed of apprehension. Was this truly the path he wanted to keep cleaving? Each face in that room held admiration mixed with fear, yet as he looked at them, he felt a stark sense of distance. Would they turn on him if weakness ever showed? The thought gnawed at him. No longer was he just their leader, he was the captain of a sinking ship. As the discussions unfolded about countering the threat, he began to sense a small, defiant voice in his head urging him to act differently. That voice whispered of courage, of choosing a path untraveled. For the first time, he considered redirecting the energies of his crew towards rebuilding rather than destruction. It led to a revelation: he could forge an alliance, establish respect for mutual gain rather than fear. Yet what about the betrayal brewing in the shadows? Would this tectonic shift expose them to vulnerabilities he couldn't bear? And how would Rita's kindness mesh with the brutal world he reigned over? As the meeting adjourned, he felt an unfamiliar sensation ripple through him, hope mingled with dread. It was uncharted territory, and yet it was mesmerizing. He had power, yes, but perhaps there was a stronger force, the ability to create a legacy devoid of bloodshed, one that could bridge the chasm between two conflicting worlds. That he decided to see Rita again, to confront the emotions she sparked within him. What if this connection could save him? What if her kindness was the shield he had been yearning for all along? But the question still lingered: would she accept him, the monster, the man steeped in fear and violence, entangled in a web of betrayal? Determined yet anxious, he prepared to take a step towards an encounter that might change the course of his destiny forever. The shadows in the alleyways awaited as he moved toward uncertainty, ready to face whatever awaited him on the other side. And at that moment, Tony understood. The time had come to confront his past and embrace the light, however frail it may be. Would he seize this chance to emerge different, or would the darkness draw him back into its deadly grasp? Rita's modest apartment stood in stark contrast to the chaos of Tony's life. The gentle hum of the heater and the soft, warm lighting created an inviting sanctuary that felt as foreign to him as the concept of safety. Standing outside her door, Tony's heart raced. He wrestled with the decision to knock, an act that seemed mundane yet monumental. He took a deep breath, summoning every bit of courage that fought against years of ingrained violence and dominance. An image of her soft gaze and soothing words bloomed in his mind, an affirmation he desperately needed. But could someone like him truly belong in such light? The echo of his fist knocking on her door ripped through the silence of the hallway, reverberating his internal dread. The moment stretched painfully long before Rita answered, her surprised expression quickly melting into a soft smile. "Tony!" she exclaimed, her voice lilting through the tense air. "Can I come in?" His voice lacked its usual authoritative edge, tinged with an uncertainty he wasn't accustomed to. Of course, she stepped aside, letting him enter. He felt the warmth envelop him, battling the cold shadow that clung to him. Space and reality narrowed in as he crossed the threshold, a slight sense of purpose bolstering his resolve. "Do you want to talk?" Rita asked, motioning toward the small kitchen table, a modest setting that felt incredibly different from the power dynamics he was used to. "Yeah," he replied, his tone cautious yet heavy with unsaid words. They settled into their seats, and he studied her while grappling for the right words, consumed with a tide of emotions that felt both foreign and liberating. "I've been thinking a lot about everything." "About what, exactly?" She leaned in, her sincere curiosity a keen beacon guiding him through the fog of his self-doubt. "About what I'm doing. My life, my choices." He could feel the weight of the words accumulating like stones in his throat. "I'm not one to judge, Tony. But I can see you're struggling," she said, her voice gentle but firm, matching the encouragement he didn't know he needed. He hesitated, the unsteady ground beneath his feet anchoring him to the fear of exposure. Yet her steadfastness breathed a hint of courage into him. "I want to create something different, I want to do something meaningful. Not just be feared." Her eyes widened with disbelief, but there was a flicker of hope intertwined with surprise. "That's a significant shift. Have you thought about what that means?" What he didn't know was how much he had been yearning for validation of this new vision. "I'm not saying I want to walk away from everything overnight, but maybe I can use my influence for something better, help people rather than hurt them." Rita's gaze softened, her understanding pouring over him like sunlight through clouds. "That's a start. But it's going to take time and effort, and some people want to let you go." He nodded, contemplating the avalanche of change that lay before him. "I can handle that. I've faced worse. But it's not just about your strength, it's about your willingness to be vulnerable." Her eyes sparkled with a mix of challenge and empathy. "Are you ready for that?" The question hung heavily in the air. Could he truly embrace vulnerability without falling apart? The realization that he might not have all the answers terrified him. Yet a quiet resolve blossomed within a determination to navigate whoever he had to confront, including himself. As they continued discussing the path forward, the tension lining his shoulders eased. He could see a vision expanding before him, layers of purpose undulating like the rising tide. But just as hope surged within him, an insidious thought wormed its way back. How would the others react to this shift? What consequences lay under the surface of his intentions? Could he truly redefine himself without facing retribution? The delicate balance between light and darkness tightened around him, and he was acutely aware of the crossroads he stood upon. As the conversation deepened, Tony felt the flicker of something more substantial forming within him, an unbreakable resolve. He sensed the shadows whispering warnings but brushed them aside. He'd deal with each challenge head-on. Would he find the strength to confront the dangerous tides shifting against him as he pursued a better life? The weight of uncertainty lingered, and he knew this was just the beginning of a long journey. Each decision would be crucial, and the time was rapidly approaching when he would have to act. With a hardened gaze, he met Rita's eyes once more. "Tell me how to begin." The commitment to unravel the darkness within himself had ignited, but the true test lay ahead. Tony sat across from Rita, a storm brewing within him as she spoke about the importance of taking actionable steps toward change. Every syllable she uttered felt like an anchor, grounding him to the resolve he desperately sought. It was clear that the journey wouldn't be easy, yet her faith in him ignited a fierce determination. "Let's start small," she suggested, her eyes reflecting an unwavering support. "What are some ways you can begin to change how others perceive you?" As he contemplated her question, an image surfaced in his mind, an old man he often saw in the neighborhood, struggling to push his grocery cart uphill. The memory stirred something inside him. "There's an elderly man down the block. I could help him." "That's a great idea. Just imagine how much a simple gesture could mean," she encouraged, leaning forward, excitement radiating off her. "It could be a stepping stone, not just for you but for him too. You might be surprised at the connections you could forge." As thoughts of the old man lingered, an unsettling doubt intruded. Was he ready to approach someone with this newfound perspective? Would he be seen as a predator parading as a protector? The shadows whispered insecurity, but he shook them away. Each fear he confronted would solidify his commitment to change. Later that night, as he walked home under flickering streetlights, Tony felt the weight of his choices pressing down on his chest. The thought of facing the old man the next day filled him with a mixture of dread and exhilaration. He could envision the myriad ways this could play out, each scenario a collision of hope and hesitation. Returning to his apartment, he scanned the collection of items littering his living space, remnants of a life defined by chaos and veiled menace. Each piece seemed to mock his intentions. Breathing deeply, he confronted the reality of his situation. The life he once relied upon would require an upheaval, yet that very thought felt liberating. He debated for hours about the best way to approach the man. Should he simply offer to carry his groceries, or invite him for coffee? This uncertainty gnawed at him, but in the recesses of his mind, another voice emerged, the voice of purpose. 2 days later, he finally found the courage to offer help. As he approached the old man's weathered figure, anxiety pulsed in his veins. "Excuse me, sir, can I help you with that?" The frail man looked up, his face tinged with surprise but softened by gratitude. It began with small talk and laughter, something Tony had nearly forgotten existed in human interaction. Each moment felt transformative. He could feel the walls he had built around himself begin to splinter. They spoke about family, dreams, and regrets. A shared vulnerability bridged their worlds. After a few minutes, the old man placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're a good man, Tony." Those words struck harder than any blow he had ever received and sank deep into his conscience. In that single moment, he found a reflection of the man he wanted to be, not just in that exchange but in every future interaction. As each day passed, he continued helping the old man, each act acting as a catalyst for change. He observed how a simple act of kindness could ripple out, affecting not only the recipient but the giver. The stark contrast this brought to his previous existence became glaringly apparent. For the first time, he realized he had the power to affect lives positively. However, as revitalizing as these encounters felt, the shadows still lurked at the edges. Each moment of growth was tinged with fear. Would those in his past allow him to redefine himself? Would they recognize him as someone deserving of redemption? In quiet moments following their talks, he wrestled with haunting thoughts. Could the past remain unshackled in the light of his change? The shadows felt closer now, a reminder that he had enemies who wouldn't take kindly to his transformation. It became evident that he needed to act decisively and prepare for confrontations ahead. This journey was not merely about nurturing goodwill, but also about establishing a new identity amidst the perilous ties of his past. "Tomorrow, I'll take another step," he promised himself, feeling his heart racing. The path had become clear, but the impending conflict would demand every ounce of resolve he had sparked. No longer could he hide in the darkness. The ghosts of his past awaited, and with each act of kindness, he would prepare to face those who might seek to extinguish his light. Still, an undeniable urge coursed through him. He needed to share his tailspin of development with Rita, to seek her insights on how to fortify his newfound resolve. With a lingering thought, he vowed to unveil every facet of his journey, questioning how he would weather the incoming storm when old connections resurfaced. Would vulnerability defeat the shadows, or would they consume him? The sun dipped below the horizon as he steeled himself, poised to step into the unknown. Tony woke the following morning feeling the weight of his commitments. The air stung with a crispness that hinted at the first whispers of winter, yet inside, his resolve burned warm and restless. Each moment of silence felt pregnant with promise, but also with uncertainty. Today would be pivotal. He would meet Rita and share the transformation that had begun to take hold of his life. On his way to the cafe where they had previously met, he replayed their last conversation in his mind. Rita had believed in him when he struggled to see any glimmer of hope in himself. Today, he needed her insight on a more formidable challenge, a confrontation with his past that loomed closer than ever. As he entered the cafe, the scent of fresh coffee surrounded him, a comforting embrace amidst the chaos swirling in his thoughts. He spotted Rita at a corner table, a bright smile illuminating her face as he approached. "Hey, Tony. You look energized," she exclaimed, gesturing for him to take a seat. Opening his mouth, he felt a surge of excitement fighting against that ever-familiar dread. "I've been helping the old man. It feels good," he began, each word carefully measured. "But there's more. I know my past won't just vanish. I can already see it creeping back." Her expression shifted, understanding immediately dawning in her eyes. You've made great strides, but you're right, confronting your past is going to require courage. I'm going to meet some old acquaintances soon, he confessed, his heart pounding against his ribcage. I need to show them I'm not who I was. What's your strategy? She pressed as if she could sense the turmoil beneath his surface. I'm going to stand firm, he replied, his resolve growing stronger with each word. I want to show them that I'm committed to change and that I won't pull back into old patterns, he declared, but a part of him fell back into doubt. Could firm resolve withstand the storm? Rita leaned in closer, her gaze steady. Remember, it's not just about proving something to them. It's about staying grounded in who you are now. What do you want from this confrontation? The question sliced through the haze, revealing his underlying fears. Was it just redemption he desired, or something deeper, trust in himself that had long eluded him? He searched her eyes, desperate for clarity. I need to reclaim my narrative. I'm no longer a villain in my story. As he spoke, Tony felt a flicker of his former self rise like a phoenix from ash, a man defined not by chaos but by the courage to change. Then you have to prepare, she urged, her expression flickering with an earnest conviction. Visualize how you will respond when they challenge you. What will you say? Tony's mind raced. He could almost hear their mocking laughter, the taunts of doubt echoing through his head. But beneath that fear lay an emerging strength. I'll remind them of the past and then I'll show them I'm moving forward regardless of their opinions. I'll stand firm. Good. Focus on owning your narrative, she encouraged. That power can be transformative for you and for them. As their conversation deepened, he discovered a newfound perspective on the upcoming confrontation. This was about more than just defending himself, it was about empowerment. Each word exchanged between him and Rita felt like armor freshly fitted for the battle ahead. Still, beneath that empowerment, shadows loomed. What would happen if they rejected this new Tony? Would he have the strength to stand his ground when his old identity sought to tether him back into the darkness? Leaving the cafe, Tony felt invigorated but apprehensive, more determined than ever, but also confronted by the reality that no amount of newfound resolve could guarantee the outcome he hoped for. Tonight, after he met with his past, he would have to reflect deeply. A decision loomed: would he risk everything he had rebuilt, or would he rise above it? As he stepped onto the busy street, he braced for the confrontation ahead. The time had come to face the shadows that threatened to eclipse his light. Could he truly forge a new identity in the embers of his past? The evening was laden with anticipation, cloaked in a darkness that felt heavier than usual. Tony strolled down streets illuminated by flickering neon lights, the cacophony of city life juxtaposing the storm brewing within him. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of resolve, yet an undercurrent of fear threatened to pull him under. He felt the weight of his past like a noose tightening around his neck as he approached the designated meet-up spot, an unassuming bar that had once served as a backdrop to his reckless decisions. Memories flooded back, laughter mixed with alcohol and maniacal friendships, times where he had eagerly surrendered to chaos. The light that now guided him felt fragile in comparison. Upon entering, there was an immediate starkness to the atmosphere. Old acquaintances loomed in clusters, their faces a patchwork of familiarity and judgment. Tony spotted them all, the ghosts of his former life, now transformed into seasoned versions of what he used to be. Would they even recognize him as someone renewed? Would they challenge the man he was trying to show them? With each pulse of his heart, he recalled Rita's words: stay grounded in who you are now. He sought to embody that presence, drawing on the strength he had nurtured in his journey since their last conversation. Yet, as he approached, he felt the old instincts rise, an impulsive urge to revert, to protect himself from the potential ridicule. Tony. One of them, a hulking figure named Marco, broke away from the pack. His voice was harsh but mocking, laced with the camaraderie that had once brought Tony both comfort and peril. Look what the cat dragged in. The big shot who thinks he can change. The tension thickened, and Tony had a choice. He could either succumb to the scorn or stand firm. He inhaled deeply, reminding himself that change required facing this ridicule head-on. I'm not who I was, Marco. I'm moving on. Laughter erupted around him, but beneath the bravado, he sensed a flicker of curiosity. Moving on? From what? Marco challenged, stepping closer, narrowing the space between them. The crowd hushed, their collective breath hanging like a thread in the air. Tony felt his stomach tighten, the specter of his insecurities clawing at his resolve. But in that moment, a seed of tenacity took root. From the chaos, from the lifestyle that dragged me into darkness. I'm here to reclaim my narrative. His voice rang out, firmer than he expected, slicing through the mocking atmosphere. No way, Marco scoffed, but his skepticism felt different now, as if he were grappling with the idea rather than outright rejection. The others watched silently, their eyes flitting between Tony and Marco, uncertainty swirling among them. Tony pressed on, emboldened. You think I'm here to justify my past? I just want you to see that change is real and within reach. I'm not afraid to show you who I am now, unlike the coward I used to be. The palpable silence that followed echoed louder than any laughter could. Tony's heart raced, fueled by adrenaline, yet intertwined with the anxiety of judgment. He felt as though he were unfurling under their scrutiny, revealing raw layers of his vulnerability. Sounds like all you want is a pat on the back for being decent, Marco shot back, but there was a hint of awareness behind it. Nobody ever changes that easily. Change doesn't happen in a vacuum, Tony countered, steadying himself. It requires confrontation, moments like this. It requires courage and it demands honesty. He realized, in those words, he was not merely speaking about himself, he was asserting the possibility of transformation that lay dormant within each of them. Yet, as the edges of resolve began to smooth over, the claws of doubt still scraped at his mind. What if this rejection made him retreat into the depths of self-doubt? What if, despite his determination, they saw only the lingering shadow of who he once was? Marco eyed him, confusion mingling with skepticism, perhaps even interest. Prove it then, he demanded, a challenge that could mean further escalation or a fork in the road towards connection. A thrill of fear and anticipation coiled tighter within Tony, mimicking the adrenaline of the moment. This could be the turning point, but it faced him with the extent of his own courage. Could he truly ignite a spark of sincerity in this raw confrontation, or would it extinguish under the weight of past expectations? Let us talk, Tony said, drawing a deep breath, his determination crystallizing. The tension in the room morphed, turning into something tangible. A crossroad stranded between the old and the new. The past was still hovering, casting shadows, yet in that split second, a realization lodged itself firmly in his mind. Transformation didn't demand perfection, it required the guts to engage with the chaos of truth. That he took a step closer, offering himself fully to the moment. What awaited him now could unravel everything he had fought for or solidify his new identity. The question lingered painfully in the air: would this confrontation with his past become the gateway to his future, or would it reinforce the shackles that had bound him for so long? The room felt electric, every breath hanging heavily as Tony stood face to face with Marco. It was a defining moment, the cusp of something monumental weaving through the air, tainted with urgency and the remnants of his past. The laughter that had once cushioned his self-destructive habits now felt like a distant echo, overshadowed by the raw reality of the man he aimed to become. Prove it, Marco repeated, his tone tinged with a mix of derision and genuine curiosity. An observer of the detritus of Tony's history, he embodied every single challenge Tony had fought against. Here was the opportunity to demonstrate change, yet an unsettling hesitation loomed within him. Tony's thoughts spiraled, questioning whether he truly grasped the complexities of transformation. Confrontational encounters had guided him to this point, but could he draw strength from the fear that lumbered within? He wouldn't let it paralyze him now. Instead, he needed to harness it, bring it to the surface, transform it into something productive. Let us talk, he declared, breaking through the stifling silence. As he motioned Marco away from the cluster, he could see the others leaning in, curious eyes gripping the unfolding situation. The awkwardness was palpable, teetering on the brink of a volatile explosion or an unexpected connection. With each step into the hushed corner of the bar, Tony sensed his resolve shifting, teetering between vulnerability and strength. Talk. You think some shared confessions are going to change anything? Marco half laughed, half sneered, leaning against a worn wooden pillar. His stance suggested both disdain and contemplation, yet there was an underlying pulse of intrigue in his posture. As Tony faced him, the room began to diminish, leaving just the two of them locked in this moment of reckoning. Thoughts raced through his mind. What did change mean if not the courage to speak truths, even the uncomfortable ones? I'm not here to pretend, Tony said, his voice uncharacteristically steady. I'm done with that. I spent too long masking my insecurities with bravado. In those few words, he felt a flicker of empowerment, a reminder that exposing his imperfect nature was part of the healing he sought. I don't need you or anyone else's validation. But I want to show you that the old me isn't coming back. Marco scrutinized him, the flicker of challenge in his eyes transforming subtly into something more complex. Why would I care about your sob story? What's in it for me? Our lives reflect our choices, Tony began, pushing through the trickle of hesitance. They define our paths. I've chosen mine to climb out of the pit I dug. He paused, needing to conjure the gravity of his words. But I know you've been trapped, too. Chaos is comfortable when you're surrounded by it, isn't it? It feels like loyalty, but it's just a storm hidden behind friendships painted in hollow laughter. A beat of silence passed, and Marco's expression faltered ever so slightly. Tony pressed on, you might think I'm lost in my naive quest for change, but inside that chaos lies the potential for clarity. I've seen firsthand the pitfalls of our lifestyle, the ways it can corrode your soul. I don't expect you to leap along with me, but what if? Tony hesitated, weighing the stakes. What if you could find some form of freedom, too? A pause lingered, leaving the air thick with tension. Marco crossed his arms, the intensity of his gaze never wavering. But something nuanced flickered across his face, curiosity battling cynicism. It felt like a chink in armor, a moment where Tony's challenge reverberated deep within him. Freedom. Marco echoed. The word sat between them, heavy with irony but also possibility. You really think that's possible for someone like me? Yes. But only if you're willing to challenge what you've accepted as comfortable, Tony asserted, the fierceness in his voice rebuilding the strength of his convictions. Reclamation isn't just for a select few, it's a tide that could lift anyone willing to swim against it. The ambivalence in Marco's demeanor hinted at a silent war being waged, not merely against Tony's words but against worlds he hadn't yet dared to reconsider. The stakes surged. This confrontation had morphed beyond personal challenge into something deeper, a pivot towards mutual understanding or perhaps shared rebellion against the chains they both carried. What's next, then? Marco asked, tension easing slightly, a hint of intrigue penetrating his bravado. Where does this go? Tony felt a shift within him, the culmination of effort and the unity between courage and vulnerability boiling down to a critical choice. We take a step together, whatever that might mean for both of us. But even as hope flickered, Tony knew that the question would linger, how long before fear crept in to suffocate their budding resolve? Today was a significant leap, yet true transformation thrived in consistency, and staying true to that sentiment required continuous effort and reassurance. As he met Marco's gaze, a bond tethered them through the vulnerability of their admission. They ventured onto uncharted grounds where the past collided unpredictably with the potential of tomorrow. The path ahead was treacherous, but Tony now felt capable. He had begun to unlock a part of himself that was both unfamiliar and exhilarating. Above all, the real test loomed in the peripheral, a moment that would come to define their choices. The next chapter of Tony's journey awaited just beyond the shadows of their past. Would he be ready to face it? The air crackled with unspoken tension as Tony remained, defying the doubts swirling within him like an electric storm. He had stepped into the arena, yet the consequences of what came next loomed like dark clouds overhead. Marco's eyes locked onto Tony's, bringing to light the heart of the matter. Change could be a catalyst, but could it also become the wrecking ball that would dismantle the foundations they'd built their existence upon? I'll be honest with you. Marco's voice cut through the silence, revealing a vulnerability edged in grit. I'm not sure I know how to change. I've spent my life digging in deeper, sometimes it feels like I've buried myself so far that the light is a distant concept. A flicker of recognition rippled through Tony. He had been there lost in a spiraling abyss where every choice felt like an exercise in futility. The truth unspooled before him, he had carved this moment from the essence of his own struggle. Breathing deeply, he anchored himself, relinquishing the tight grip of his instinctual defenses. Changing is terrifying, he replied, with an honesty that felt raw yet liberating. But sometimes, that fear can empower you. The darkness whispers, but we have the strength to shout back, to redefine who we are. Behind Marco's calculated facade, Tony could sense a war brewing, a battle between fear of the unknown and the glimmer of hope that lay in the palms of their hands. There had to be a way forward, yet an unsettling doubt crept onto the scene. Was he putting too much faith in Marco? How do you know it will work? What if we fail? Marco's question felt like cutting through the fog of uncertainty and revealing bare, jagged rocks underneath. Because failure is part of the journey, Tony asserted, the eagerness of his words surprised him even more than Marco. Every time we stumble, we learn. And what you learn is more valuable than any temporary success. It's about progress, not perfection. Furthermore, we already walked into the dark together, why shy away from the healing light? Marco's brow furrowed as he absorbed Tony's words. Somewhere, beneath the layers of bravado and fear, a part of him started to resonate with the notion of vulnerability not as a sign of weakness, but rather as a pathway to resilience. Fine, Marco conceded at last, though the hardness of his expression remained. Let us say I'm in. What now? Tony paused. The foundational structure of his newfound belief was starting to take shape, but the next steps were the most crucial part. We start simple. Let us face our past, our decisions, and begin to expunge the unnecessary weights. I've realized after countless nights grappling with regret that understanding pain is essential to overcoming it. Expunge? You think it's that easy? Marco scoffed, barriers leaping back to life. Yet there was something in his eyes that intimated he wondered if there might be a glimmer of truth amidst the sarcasm. It won't be easy. But nothing worth pursuing ever is. Tony spoke with softened conviction. Take a risk, share your story. If we look through our past experiences, we find roots that need to be uprooted. Only then can we plant new seeds of possibility. Let's break down those walls, little by little. A span of silence enveloped them as realization dawned on Marco. For the first time, there was no humor laced with malice, no defenses crudely forged from distrust. The battle lines he had drawn began to blur, the echo of change wove through his hesitance, pushing against the tide. Maybe, he ventured, sounding almost cautious. Maybe I have a few stories worth sharing. Tony held the moment delicately, aware that this just might be the turning point they'd both been unknowingly seeking. With the weight of his past still heavy in the air, he could almost see the flickering embers of opportunity begin to ignite. The journey ahead, though it twisted into uncharted territory, offered the possibility of connection. As conversation unfolded, each revelation layered upon the last, Tony recognized he was not only facing Marco but also the fractured pieces of his own identity. They were stitching together their destinies, guided by the compass of vulnerability and resilience. However, amid the fragile beginnings of camaraderie, a shadow lingered, a name, a face from Tony's past that suddenly felt more prominent. He had felt the taste of fear trailing around them as they peeled back the masks they wore. Who else would be watching? What consequences awaited as they navigated these treacherous waters? A chilling thought settled in Tony's chest. Would embracing change invite new dangers into their lives, or could this truly forge an unbreakable bond? The lingering question hovered as they delved deeper into their stories, unaware of the shadows lurking just outside their fragile herald of transformation. Would their quest for freedom find roots, or would it provoke the wrath of their past? The atmosphere shifted subtly, a fragile balance hanging between the uneasy alliance being forged and the ghosts of their pasts casting long shadows. As the conversation meandered from transparency to tentative admissions, Tony realized that each shared memory had the power to shape their collective path forward. He observed Marco, his demeanor softening as vulnerability surfaced, an unfamiliar territory for both men. "Do you remember the first time you hurt someone?" Marco finally asked, the question both heavy and unassuming. The suddenness clawed at Tony's gut, spurred memories he might have preferred to forget. Struggling to articulate a response, he felt the tightness in his chest grow. "I remember the regret well," he said, voice low. "It was a long time ago, but the weight has never fully lifted. I shoved a friend aside during a fight. My pride was all that mattered. I didn't realize it would sever our friendship." He watched Marco's eyes narrow, curiosity mingled with his own built-up defenses. "What was it like after?" "Lonely," Tony admitted, the sincerity of his emotion a dagger to his own armor. "Regret turned into a punitive self-dialogue. I found myself questioning every choice I made after that. I reinvented myself to hide the brokenness inside, but that only led to an even darker conclusion. I needed to change, and quick." Marco's silence was contemplative, as if the pieces of his own fractured identity were spinning slowly to line up. "I guess we all have that moment, the one where it hits you hard." "Exactly. That moment is the linchpin of transformation, a point of no return," Tony said, his determination solidifying. They were not just recounting stories, they were inviting change to take root, intertwining their vulnerabilities like tendrils seeking the light. As the conversation deepened, Tony felt a shift within himself, a growing realization that they were each discovering hidden competencies through this shared exploration of emotion. The capacity to empathize, to understand personal pain, had become an unexpected trait surfacing amidst their discussions. "You speak so passionately about change and confronting the past, but can you bear the cost?" Marco challenged, his eyes probing for any inconsistency in Tony's resolve. "What if the truths we unearth are more than we reckon with? What if they reshape everything we thought we knew?" For a brief moment, Tony faltered. The weight of unguarded honesty pressed down upon him. "Then we face them together. That's where the real strength lies, having someone by your side, refusing to hide. The cost will be high, yes. But I'm tired of running." "It's exhausting," he replied, taking a breath as though to steady himself for what lay beyond. Understanding blossomed between them, a quiet acknowledgement of the dangers they were courting. The changes they welcomed could indeed attract the past they sought to escape, propelling neither of them into unprepared territory. As the dialogue continued, Tony's resolve shifted toward planning action, a tangible step deeper into the unknown. "Let us not just talk about it. Let us set specific goals for what we want to achieve. It's time to be proactive," he suggested, empowered by the revelations they'd borne to light. "Like sharing our stories with others? What about those people we've hurt?" Marco asked, the wheels in his mind turning. "Are we ready for those conversations?" Tony's heart raced. "Perhaps initiating from the smallest step, starting with one person, one story. We can begin within our close circles. I want to show others that it's okay to confront their own darkness." A shared silence ensued, both realizing the magnitude of the venture that lay ahead. Then, a fresh concern flickered in the back of Tony's mind. Would they be willing to face the ugly truths of their lives, not only for their own growth but also for the sake of others? With each moment that passed, unease crept back, not unlike the awareness of a predator trailing in the shadows. The fear of retaliation from their choices was a constant whisper. But, what if some people push back? The ones we've wronged before? Then we stand firm, Marco replied, the edge in his voice igniting a newfound determination in Tony's heart. "If we're going to walk this path, we have to be prepared for resistance, ours and others. It's part of the journey." The tension mounted around them as they both became aware of just how precarious their aspirations truly were. They chased healing while stepping closer to potential conflict, shadows looming larger. Was this direct confrontation with reality worth the potential fallout? As they gave voice to their fears, a subtle shiver danced through Tony. The unfamiliarity of solidarity brought with it the brutal truth: not everyone eagerly awaited the change they sought. The lurking presence of the past still hung heavily would it emerge to disrupt the peace they desperately sought. "Time to start facing the shadows," Tony murmured, feeling the weight of his declaration. Wouldn't their honesty inspire others to do the same? They were at the brink of something monumental, yet the stakes escalated each second, building pressure like a high-stakes game of chicken, but what had begun as a simple exploration of their stories could explode into an awakening that neither man anticipated, one that threatened to redefine who they were. Would they emerge from the darkness, or would the past consume them both? The call for courage was set, but as their stories entwined, the possibility of confrontation loomed. Tony felt the pulse of fear mixed with exhilaration. Would their newfound alliance survive the upcoming storm of truth, or would it all spiral into chaos? Tony stood at the threshold of change, realizing fully for the first time that he was no longer caged by the fury of his past. The confrontation with Marco had ignited something within him, a flicker of empowerment and the recognition that vulnerability could forge a path towards redemption. This newfound understanding coursed through him like a rush of adrenaline, invigorating him for the journey ahead. Months had passed since that fateful meeting, and Tony had cultivated relationships with several members of his old circle, reinforcing their ties while reshaping them into a network of support rather than fear. He had taken pivotal steps to reclaim his narrative, shifting from a life defined by intimidation to one defined by choice. Each encounter, whether with an old friend or a new acquaintance, served as a testament to his growth. He had begun a program within the community, aiming to empower individuals craving change, modeling a life rooted in solidarity rather than dominance. As the winds of transformation swept through his life, he found himself standing before a group of aspiring individuals, faces brimming with a mix of skepticism and hope. The stakes felt palpable. Tony had invited them into the initiative out of genuine commitment to change his own, but also theirs. In the pit of his stomach, nerve twisted with anticipation, this was not just another street meeting cloaked in bravado, it was a display of raw honesty. "Thank you all for coming," he began, commanding the room with a calm confidence he had fought hard to cultivate. "I stand before you not as a figure of fear but as someone striving for betterment, one choice at a time." His voice rang true, lifting the heaviness that had once characterized his interactions. "Each of us carries a story, a shadow. Together, we can shine a light on those stories. Understanding our pasts form the foundation of our futures." A thin veneer of hesitation lay draped over the crowd, yet he pressed on, determined to burst through to the other side. He introduced personal anecdotes, but now, instead of tales of violence, they were narratives of change, the moments that had led him to embrace compassion over cruelty. As he spoke of the old man he had helped so many months ago, he could see eyes soften. He shared how kindness had forged unexpected connections. In each word, Tony could feel pieces of the world surrounding him shift, the atmosphere invigorated with energy. Connections sparked as individuals began to share, one by one, the depths of their experiences. Vulnerability became a collective strength, a unifying thread weaving their journeys together. They slowly uncovered layers of hurt and regret, painting the true essence of struggle intertwined with triumph. Tony felt grounded amidst the swelling emotions. The transformations he had fostered a living testament to the power of choice. That it dawned on him in that moment, so profoundly clear, the impact of kindness mismatched with courage could bridge even the gnarliest of divides. He stood as proof. Time draped around him differently now, unhurried and full of rich possibility. Each success felt like a battle won, the remnants of the past fading into background echoes, muted by a concert of affirmative choices. Weeks morphed into months, the initiative took off as community members resonated with the mission, empowered individuals arming themselves with honesty and support. They disrupted the toxic cycles that had long defined their lives while expanding his view of mentorship far beyond anything he had previously deemed possible. Tony recognized this burgeoning resilience mirrored his growth. He was forging a fresh legacy, one grounded in empathy, respect, and real-world change. On the eve of a significant milestone, a community event dedicated to celebrating their collective progress, Tony lingered, staring into the night. He reflected on the shadows that had once stifled him. They no longer threatened his existence but offered lessons instead. The kindness that had been so alien seemed now like second nature, flowing through him with Every beat of his heart.as families gathered in the vibrant celebration. Tony observed the joy radiating from the crowd. Faces he once knew as adversaries now mingled with those of newfound allies. Everyone embraced the urgency of positive transformation. The tangible fear of betrayal had dissipated. Ambitious aspirations stood tall. He had succeeded in shifting fear into fuel for change, acceptance over arrogance, healing over hurt. In the quiet moments before stepping onto the stage to address the crowd, he felt a rush of gratitude wash over him. He had spent years practicing resilience against this tide of darkness, and now, standing in the light of connection, he understood the magnitude of true fulfillment. Tony had created a life where kindness became his legacy, the truest victory emerging from the depths of struggle, and so, he stepped out into the light, ready to share how far he had come, galvanized by the memory of a singular act of kindness that had transformed everything. An audible breath escaped his chest, his heart full. As he opened his mouth, voice steady, he put into words the profound impact vulnerability and courage had sowed within him, a new chapter beginning not just for him but for everyone around him. It was the dawn of a brighter, bolder future. Now is the moment for you to seize this journey of personal overcoming. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach further. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share the light of transformation. You need to show your support.